CRUDE Audacity Podcast.
You are listening to the CRUDE Audacity Podcast, the podcast that talks shop shit and, of course, all things strategy with oil patch influencers. I am Catherine Mills, and wherever you happen to be today, go ahead and leave us a rate and review. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, go ahead and click that little button down there, hit subscribe for us. That way you can stay up to date on all things oil, energy, and, of course, the CRUDE Audacity. So now we are going to jump into it, everyone. If you know me or if you have been watching the podcast or listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I am passionate about building good business. It really doesn't matter whether you are an entrepreneur scaling your business up and down, an innovator, leveraging media, or just looking at the stats and how you make your impact. So I love navigating the narrative of what it means to have good business strategy. And while it may all start with an idea, you don't get anywhere until you have a good pitch. And that is today's topic. So I am joined by the one and only Miss LINDSEY APLAND of Urban Solution Group. LINDSEY, welcome to the CRUDE Audacity Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. As you know, this has been a podcast in the making. I'm so excited to finally discuss this topic with you because, quite frankly, the concept of pitching, it fascinates me. It doesn't matter if you are an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, a first job, a CEO, or some mid-level management. In every industry, especially in the energy industry, you are always pitching. And there is an art to it. You know, you want to understand your audience. You want to understand how you are coming across during the presentation. And most importantly, you want to own that pitch. You want that confidence. And I know that's something that you have had a plethora of experience with. So how did you get into oil and energy? Why oil and energy? And what are you doing today? Can you just give us the full story?
Sure. So I started in oil and energy in 2008, which seems like yesterday, but I guess a few years have gone by. And I just kind of fell in my lap a little bit. I was, a couple years out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I had actually gotten a second job waitressing downtown. Ended up being at a restaurant that a lot of energy people came to often. Yeah. So I got to know a few of them, some of them became my regulars. So I learned a little bit about the industry that way, and then just kind of gained relationships. And they kind of, eventually asked me if I wanted to interview for a position. It was actually a Canadian company that was, looking to expand into the US. So that sparked my interest right away. And then, I just interviewed with them, and it was a noise mitigation company specifically for oil and gas. And at the time I had no idea what they were talking about. But it sounded interesting. It sounded a little bit challenging. And I liked the fact that it was, had the industrial aspect to it. I grew up in Eastern Colorado in a small town. So it was very, ag based, industrial based. So I was always kind of, intrigued by kind of a mix of the city with, I would go out into the field potentially. So, so that's, I think, what kind of sparked my interest initially. And then, so I just kind of jumped in and, had to learn very quickly, what I was going to be doing.
So that was baptizing by fire in this.
Yeah. Drinking from the water hose is what we kind of like to call it. So that was in 2008, and I started with a company. Like I said, they were expanding into the US, so I kind of wore a lot of hats. I was like their office manager. What I mainly focused on was like inside technical sales. So I would work a lot with the engineers and the designers and the customers and just help, make sure we were providing the right solution to the customer. I never wanted to go into outside sales. I was the person that in college I would literally throw up before speech class because I didn't like talking in front of people. And I was very lucky to have a lot of good mentors at my first, the company that I started in the industry with. I ended up being there for, I guess, about 12 or 13 years. So I really did grow up with the company in the US. I got to see a lot of different aspects and work with all the different departments. So that was really, I learned a lot. And then I had a lot of great mentors there too that helped me, pushed me out of my comfort zone, which I didn't like at the time, but now looking back, I know that it was really good for me. And so, yeah, I did.
Outside of your zone.
Just talking in front of people. I kind of wanted to be the person behind a computer where I didn't have to really talk to people. But as I started going to client meetings and, my boss at the time, we were doing a lunch and learn for a company. He's 5 minutes before, he's like, okay, you're doing this one. So I didn't have time to get nervous. I just had to do it. But, afterwards it felt great. So that's kind of like, drinking from the water fountain. So yeah, you have to continually challenge yourself and, to grow professionally and personally. So yeah, that's kind of my story. And then I was with that company for a few years. I actually, while I was in that position, met my current employer. I was one of their vendors. So that was kind of we always joke and say that it was kind of an unconventional interview process.
Full circle.
Yeah. So at the time, I met my employer, Tidy Gill, and I knew like right off the bat that, she was somebody that,
she's a force.
Yeah, like I respected her. As soon as she walked in the room and started talking, I was like, wow, like, when you just meet a person, you're like, I like that person. So I just always, I guess right off the bat, we kind of had a good connection, I guess. And I worked with her on a few projects. And then, I always very much had the same kind of beliefs or values as far as how you work with customers and kind of the standards that you want to withhold for your clients and things like that. Yeah. So then, eventually the opportunity presented itself and, offered me a position to work with Urban, and I took it. And so I've only been with Urban actually since March. So it hasn't been that long. However, I have kind of worked with the team previously on a couple projects. So I was familiar with everybody, which made it an easier transition. And I came on board with Urban as more of a business development manager role. And then things kind of quickly, I guess, escalated or, with COVID and oil pricing. So things changed quickly in 2020. So the opportunity again presented itself to step into more of a general manager role. So that's what I'm doing for Urban now, which has been really awesome. So I'm still overseeing business development, but then I also get to be involved in more of the full life cycle, which I enjoy. I've never been one to just get the purchase order and toss it over my back and then
exactly. You're not a burn personality.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. You want to see how it ends up, I guess. So now I'm kind of helping oversee our engineering department and our operations department. So I'm just a little bit more involved in, I guess, all aspects of the whole, sales to execution life cycle, which is awesome. Yeah. And then, I'm learning a lot too. Like I've obviously, working a lot with Heidi and then the rest of the team. It's just been, again, drinking from the fire hose, which is good. You never get bored. But yeah, so learning a lot, and it's been a great opportunity so far. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. Well, it's kind of interesting how you made your way into oil and gas. I mean, yes, you liked the ag side of it. I got to say that's what drew me to the industry as well, is I'd have the opportunity to go outside and actually do something.
Right.
But, you built connections, and in a way you were pitching yourself. So this is a very connected, full circle discussion on the many faces of what it means to build, recognize, and deliver pitching opportunities.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you're starting to tell us more about your story from a sales perspective. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who say they're not in sales. And I'm sorry, but I wholeheartedly disagree with this statement. You might not have a sales title, but you are constantly selling one way or the other, and it is a form of negotiation. So can you sort of take us through, even with the changes you're seeing over at Urban, what are the faces of selling? Why is everyone in sales, and why should we all be embracing this notion?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think everybody, to a certain extent, is a salesperson. You're always selling yourself. I mean, any job interview you go into, you're selling yourself. I think everybody throughout this, I'll talk about the life cycle of the sales process again. I mean, everybody in the company has a part of that, how it ends up, how it's executed, so everybody needs to have pride in what they're doing or contributing. And then, I mean, you're selling, everybody's a salesperson. If you're walking down the street and you end up, especially in our industry too, sometimes we get a bad rap. And as to be an advocate of our industry, just try to get the positive word out. And it's not like you're trying to, negotiate or, get somebody like the greasy car salesman, you just need to be transparent and honest and show empathy for people. So I would say at any point you need to have your salesperson hat on, even if you're not technically a salesperson. It's only going to help you in any endeavor.
I mean, it's company reputation. It's your reputation. It's how you communicate. I mean, thinking that just because you're not signing the dotted line to make that contract happen, to your point, does not mean you aren't a part of the total build, the deliverable, the execution of it.
Right.
And embracing that portion, I think, is most important when understanding the pitch and what the many faces of a pitch, and then what you yourself are bringing to the table, be you an entrepreneur or, a first-time engineer or field guy or what have you. But let's start breaking down the concept of pitching. So when I initially think of pitching, I think of I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going after an asset. I'm trying to build a company of some kind. And the reality is that you're always pitching. So where do you see that happening in our industry, and how can people recognize when they need to own their pitch, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think, anytime you're pitching something, so first you need to obviously do some research and make sure that there's a need there. If you're trying to pitch something to somebody that wouldn't use your product or your service or whatever, then it's obviously not going to be the outcome's not going to be as well as you would have expected it. So you always have to do your research, make sure there's a business need or a business case. And then, just have confidence, and then just, really go into it and I always say you first need to listen to your customer to see what their problem is, and then you can, try to help them find a solution or an answer to that. If you're not listening, then you're making assumptions and doing all these things. And then you just always have to be, like I said, transparent and, have candor. You obviously want to set expectations for what your customer is going to experience, so that way the whole way through the process, they're kind of going to know what to experience. You don't want to overpromise something and underdeliver. If anything, you want to, underpromise and overdeliver. Just kind of know where your strengths are and know your, potential and what you can bring to the table. You don't want to promise something that you can't back up.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say all that, because one of your points there was identifying the need. And that's where everyone has to start. I don't care what you're doing in this industry. That is always where you have to start. And that's a really complicated process. So how do you go through doing the research, recognizing the market, filling the gap, or pitching the idea of filling the gap internally before you go external? Because right now, the energy space and the oil and gas space are shrinking, and our future it's a gray blur right now. We don't know which direction we're going to go.
No, forecasting is very difficult in 2020, that's for sure. You never know week to week what's going to happen.
Forecasting, I have this idea, or I know that there's a market shrinkage of some form. How do you do the research? Where do you start?
I mean, I think you start with your network to begin with. I think a lot of times people forget, how connected they are and that they have a huge wealth of information at their fingertips. Obviously there's the World Wide Web that can basically give you anything you want. But a lot of the information and feedback that you need is, you just reach out to friends and colleagues within the industry and ask the question. I mean, you're never going to know if you don't ask the question. So I think that's definitely the first place I would start. We're doing something similar at Urban. Throughout kind of COVID and the slowdown in the market and everything, we can either sit back and write it out and cross our fingers and hope that everything comes back, or we could figure out, how we can continue to stay relevant and add value to our customers and pivot. So we're actually, working on a new product that's been really exciting.
I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, and we're it's getting closer, so it's kind of slowly making the transition to more of a real tangible product that we can start launching soon. But that's where we started. We just started reaching out to our connections and meeting with them and saying, like, here's what we're thinking. What would add value for you? Like, where do you have a need for something like this? So that's kind of what I would recommend as a starting point.
At any point during that process, because again, it goes back to if you're an entrepreneur, somewhere in the tier of whatever structure you have, were you ever afraid of reaching out because you had an idea, you still want to protect that idea, but to your point, you have to start asking questions, you have to start doing research. So did you ever run into a situation where you were questioning how you were questioning?
There's always a little bit of hesitation with stuff like that, but a lot of times there's more risk in not doing something, and there's never perfect timing for anything. Whether it's having a kid or, just launching a new product in a pandemic with a market crash. So I think it's just kind of, you have to take a chance and jump off that ledge every once in a while and go for it. You're not always going to get positive feedback, but negative feedback is valuable too. So I think it's just, you have a solid idea, that there is a business case and you can provide value to people. So you just kind of dive in and start doing the research and not sharing too much to where your secret sauce would get out there and somebody could steal it, but at least kind of building that anticipation and interest.
So how are you encouraging your sales team when you're coming up with new products or you're looking to scale up and down contingent upon the pivots we've been faced with in the energy sector? How are you helping them navigate those types of conversations? How much leverage are you giving them, basically?
Yeah, we're trying to be strategic in that we're staying focused on kind of our core client base at this time. Urban's a little unique, and that's one reason why I was so honored when the opportunity arose to be a part of the team, because it's not, they put a lot of value on the customer relationships. It's not just a client. There's a lot more to it than that. And you put a lot of effort into just customer service, I guess, in general. Our customers are kind of like our family in a sense. Like, we really try to treat them right in everything we do. So we do, like, it's in for the long term type of thing. Like, we don't just want to do one project with them. Like, we want to, once we work with them, we want it to maintain for many, many, many years. So I think we're trying to be strategically focused and, make sure that we prioritize our current clients, but then also we don't want to just have all of our eggs in one basket either. So we are aware that we need to still be filling the pipeline, but we just need to be strategic about it. You don't want to be spread too thin, but you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And it's kind of interesting watching the headlines coming out where some people may have kept all their eggs in one basket for the last few years. And whether that was a smart approach or not, I don't think anybody planned for this, but now they didn't give themselves enough rope to get themselves out of it either, so to speak. So, okay, you have this idea, you start researching yourself. I am of the opinion that when you need to take that next step and get out into the the gap analysis. That's what I've always been told it's called, but it's really just competitive market research, because I know gap stands for other things as well. But how do you start looking, all right, I have this idea, I've got a little bit of buy-in. Now, the other half of that need is, what are my competitors doing? How can I be unique? And how do you actually go and find quantifiable data on your competitors before you start putting pen to paper?
Yeah, I mean, that can be tough. I mean, obviously, again, the World Wide Web is probably the first source you would try to go to. And then, I mean, and just probably just the conversations again with your network or your customers, like questions like, what are you missing? Like, if we could improve anything for you, what would it be? So I would go, I mean, straight to the horse's mouth. You're going to be getting business from these people, so you want to know what their need is. So that's probably, and then, you never want to, I guess, talk down about competition, because everybody needs competition.
Competition is a good thing. People.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's trying to make a living. So yeah, I think you just do your research, learn as much as you can, and then try to add more value where you can.
Are you identifying metrics when you're doing these competitor analysis? So this is what I'm pitching. This is my idea. This is how it stacks up against said competitor A and B.
Yeah.
How are you formulating that? Because at that point, there's no bench for what is good or what is bad as you're coming up with new products. Or hell, if you're like me, I like the naivety card.
Yeah.
As long as I don't know about it, I just keep in my own lane, and therefore it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely that aspect to it too. I mean, yeah, and there is, one side of it is you have a good idea, you're committed to doing it. Failing is not an option. So you just go, and I like your, be naive about it. And maybe there's not a competition, and then you're really on the right track,
That could be fun, but in this day and age, even though there might not be initial competition, it's always following you one way.
Yeah, it's not far behind, that's for sure. But if you're having a hard time finding something to compare, like apples to apples with what you're doing, that's a good thing.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So now you've got your elements of your pitch. Again, internal, external, entrepreneur, building a line of business, expanding into a new market. What are the elements how do you go about identifying the elements that are most important to what you then need to start presenting internally so that you can go external?
I think it's based on the feedback from the customers, and it's probably not going to be the same on every project or with every customer. Everybody kind of has certain needs. So you need to be, I guess, general enough so what you're offering appeals to the masses, but have the flexibility to be, have a customized solution when you need it, if that answers your question, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking about the metrics. Like, you've done this market research. Now, what do you actually present from that research?
As you're pitching?
As you're pitching, yeah.
Yeah. Data always, you can't argue with data. So I think if you can use numbers, then that is probably the best solid approach to do it. And then obviously, you have to have passion and excitement about what you're pitching, and then like transparency, and candor. And if you can also take the business side out of it a little bit. Everything is always, business, but then as you're pitching with somebody, if you can find some common ground to just kind of grow that relationship and grow that trust to make somebody remember you, as, when, they might not have a need for your product or service right at that instant, but you want them to remember you. So when they do have a need, you're who comes to mind. So you're like, you want to become the guy or the girl for sound walls or whatever the need is.
So that's actually a really cool spin on it. How are y'all managing, or how have you managed rather, the non-quantifiable data? It's not all about, our industry's changed. It's not just about taking someone to lunch 5 days a week until they sell you something. There's something else that, in every pitch that doesn't really have a measurement to it, but there is value. So how are you presenting that side of the equation to, come full circle with it?
That's tough. I'd almost say that you would want to, I think as you're pitching with somebody, like at the beginning of the process, I think really the way to like quantify it, or I don't know. I mean, I think you just need to back up what you're saying. I think a lot of times, and that's hard to track, I guess. So that's kind of what came to mind when you asked me, how do you track the intangible items or pieces of a sale? I think a lot of times people talk a big game, but they don't deliver or execute or, follow through. So I think that to me is one of the biggest things that you can do to just kind of, guarantee that you're going to get repeat business or something like that. Just do what you say you're going to do, and then you're going to automatically gain the trust of somebody, and they're going to remember that, or and solve their problem at the same time, hopefully.
So when you're working towards leaving that impact, let's say you've got a first meeting, a first encounter, and you could be asking for anything in this particular case. I'm always a fan of having at least a one-pager in my backpack or something like that, but a lot of people don't like paper. So what are your thoughts on when you're meeting a new contact, or you're trying to further an existing relationship, leverage an existing relationship? How do you start that initial pitch conversation? And honestly, do elevator pitches even work anymore?
I don't know. I don't know if elevator pitches are necessarily my style. I honestly we talked about you're always selling yourself. So at the first time I'm meeting somebody, I almost just more try to build a relationship, see if it's something that can grow. And it goes both ways. You want to make sure that you're, that it's somebody that you would want to work with and somebody that would want to work with you. And then once you kind of gain that relationship or that trust, then I think that's when you can sprinkle business into it a little bit more. Because you're gonna buy from somebody that you like, right? So I think you first need to sell yourself, and then you can talk about business needs of the person, and then decide on what solution you have to fill that need.
So don't lead with the sale, essentially.
I don't think so. No.
Do you foresee, the market is shrinking. It's a more competitive market, and people are still using old tactics. So, but we don't always have the luxury anymore of, in some places I've been, but you'll get guys just rolling up to other work sites and being like, how much are they doing it? I'll do it for this much. It is becoming much more cutthroat. So
yes,
with the market shrinking, and again, people don't realize, but this is happening across all forms of energy right now, because it's happening to oil and gas. And the correlations are quite strong. So when you're running into a situation where you and your team have to be more competitive, what are you doing that's actually working? Because when someone rolls up to one of my sites and I've already got everyone set up, all you're doing is annoying me at that point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it is cutthroat right now. The number of opportunities out there is lower than normal. So everybody,
you have to go create them yourself. They're not out there to go chase.
Yeah. No, you have to claw and dig and find any opportunity that you can. And like you said, it's cutthroat right now. We're definitely, building off of the relationships with our customers that we have. And we've, really tried to look at it, not just a customer vendor relationship, but more of a partnership. So how we can, really work with them to help us both ride out this market as it is. So that's kind of what I would say. Obviously you've got to be more competitive too. You still have to showcase the value that you bring to the table, but it's definitely very competitive right now, for sure.
So outside of the business aspect, how can individuals be more competitive in a shrinking market, especially for those who want to stay? And there are quite a few who want to stay.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't work with just word of mouth anymore. You need a little more oomph. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you have to stay positive, obviously. I mean, it's very easy this year to get, you get knocked down, you have to get back up again over and over and over. 2020 is definitely, I think, a harder year than any of us have probably had to go through, just in general,
It's new. It's completely new. Everything's new.
Yeah. It's crazy. But I really just think, I feel like I'm a broken record repeating it, but I think you just really have to concentrate on the connections that you have with people. We kind of talked about it at the beginning, but you never know. The oil and gas industry especially is a very small world, and you never know where your paths might cross again. So, if you're working with an engineer on a project and you think it might be the only time you ever work with him or something like that, you never know where you might see them again. You might be working with them, or they may, have some sort of opportunity that could help you, or you could help them. So I would just say, you got to stay out there. You need to stay relevant, continue to try to be creative in how you can create value for your customers, your colleagues, your coworkers, everybody, and just kind of help everybody ride it out.
Are you looking for new markets to move into where you otherwise probably wouldn't? Because that's a whole new ballgame as well. There are a bunch of small service companies throughout the energy sector, and they only had to work within a 50-mile radius. And now, do they go home? What do they do?
Definitely something that's on our radar. Again, there's a cost associated with doing things like that as well. So you have to be strategic about it and look at the numbers. So I kind of go back to, we're mildly looking at, expansion into different regions, I guess you could call it. However, we're smart about putting a large investment in it at this point, but I would say we're ready to go if we need to be. However, we're just watching the upfront spend in order to do so.
Are you seeing other small operators? What are you seeing happen? Because I know you're out, you're sitting there, you're talking to everyone still. You really do have a pulse on how people are adjusting. So what are you noticing across the market for some of the smaller guys? How are they staying afloat, and what are they doing that might be impressive to you? Or what have you seen that you might say, if you're doing that, you need to reevaluate?
I think a lot of people, if you were in a good situation going into kind of the market downturn, I think you're obviously able to ride it out a lot better or a lot longer. I think a lot of people are either saying, sit back, let's just ride it out, let's, minimize our expenses, let's cut, let's save where we can, and then when the market comes back, then we can kind of play ball again. And then there's others who are trying to, like us, figure out how they can diversify, how they can kind of pivot and, not have all their eggs in one basket, which, maybe that's oil and gas, or maybe that's just one, customer. So I think people are just getting creative in how they're doing things.
Is there anything you're seeing that is obviously on its way out the door in terms of survival techniques?
I don't think so. I've been more impressed with kind of the creativeness that people are figuring out as far as how to survive. Okay. Not just specifically oil and gas, but restaurants, for example, have like the outdoor little inflatable igloos, So I think people really figure out what to do when they're pushed up against a wall. Mm-hmm. It's like survival mode kind of. So that's what's been kind of interesting for me to watch is, we're put up against the wall. So it's either like, okay, well, it's this, or we got to shut the door type of thing. So it's been really cool to see kind of what companies are coming up with.
Are you seeing on your team, I like to say entrepreneur, intrapreneur, solopreneur, all of those, because I think they all have an individual segment in the market. But we're also seeing managers get more creative with their lines of business to keep their teams. Are you seeing any of that sort of intrapreneur working on your business happening in-house, and what's unique about that? Because it used to be, you just had your numbers to hit, but now people are, like you said, they're up against a wall, they're getting creative.
Yeah.
What is that creativity you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've got, when things slow down, that's when you have more time too to really look at things. So when you're busy and everything's moving so fast, you just want to get the job done, and you don't have so much time to look more granular at the process and everything like that. So I would say that that's what our team's kind of objective was at the beginning of the market slowdown was, we're going to take this time and really reevaluate and making sure that we're being efficient with everything we're doing. Where can we improve the process? And then that's we've also kind of given our employees the flexibility to say, if you think something can be done better, then let's do it. And then also, for example, like our engineering services have increased over the slowdown. So we've really had some people step up internally to help kind of diversify our engineering services that we've provided historically before that. So that's been cool to see.
Are they getting any sort of perks for thinking outside the box? I've kind of heard through the grapevine that some people are getting kickbacks of some kind, like, hey, you did this, and we're going to support you through some sort of, like, I call it a bonus, but I don't think that's the right word for it. So are you seeing that anywhere, that extra incentive to encourage the creativity?
Yeah, and I don't know what other companies are doing, but what I do like about Urban is they're always very much giving back to their employees and investing in their employees. So it's we don't have one like thing that we say, oh, if you have a good idea or if you improve this, here's what you get. It's kind of just, we kind of figure it out as we go, but we always make sure that we, let that person know that they're doing a good job and they're in the right direction, and make sure that they get rewarded and recognized for it.
See, I love that, because the old ways of the oil field, you just came into your 9 to 5 and you don't get a pat on the back for doing your job. But now you get rewarded for being the creative one, the challenger, the innovator. And that to me tells me that there's a lot of good coming out of this pivot itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting oil field, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of the next generation of oil field, which is, that's one thing that, like I said before, my kind of core values really, really aligned with Urban's, as far as just the culture and, how employees are treated and kind of the work-life balance that comes with it. So that's one thing that's always like super high on our awareness, I guess.
So for those small guys who are still, they are the fighters and they're doing their damnedest, but they've never had to reach outside of their 50-mile radius, do you have any tips for them on how to gain more of an audience, more of a name recognition? Do you have any tips for them on how to sort of gain more leverage through economical means? What might be a way to sort of expand your reach that you probably wouldn't have leveraged otherwise?
I mean, in my experience, when I've tried to, at my previous role, we expanded. We were based in Colorado and then ended up expanding out into the Pennsylvania market. So I was pretty involved in that. And I mean, at that time, boots on the ground was very important. So, like actually physically going out there, visiting for weeks at a time, getting to know the lay of the land, meeting people, growing that network out there. Yeah. So, just doing your research, making sure there is an opportunity before you fully set up shop, things like that. Yeah. So that would probably be my first recommendation. And then, always kind of think about what resources you can get for a minimal cost. I mean, social media is not great for so many things, but if you use it right as far as a marketing tool, when you're trying to keep costs down, I mean, I think it can be a great kind of channel to get your name and, get that out there. So
are y'all seeing any success in that digital realm?
Well, we're kind of slow. We haven't really started pushing it too much yet. But that's the plan, I think. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So coming full circle, you make your pitch. There's no point to lead with paper, lead with personality, the reputation. First they like you, then they trust you, then you pitch to them.
Mm-hmm.
How are you forecasting and how are you deciding to manage your team? We don't know what's around the corner, so I have half this argument that forecasting is always wrong. But you can't operate like that. So what are y'all doing to, predict whatever it might be called?
Yeah, forecasting is definitely much more difficult this year as compared to previous years, I guess you could say, just because there are so many unknowns, with COVID and everything else. But I think, historically what you do is you look at activity, look at trends, hopefully you're tracking that stuff internally. And then that just helps you obviously get an idea of, this time last year, this is what it was. This is, the first quarter, this is kind of the activity that we had operators looking at. And then just, again, asking the question, talk to your customers, ask them I think a lot of times you think you're going to be pushy by asking your customers those questions, but in reality, in my mind, by asking them so you can be more proactive in the activity that is coming up, then that's just going to help you service them better. So in my mind, just don't be afraid to ask the question.
Do you think quotas will still be a thing in the oil field after all of this? Because, everybody used to chase that number. They had to grow. You have to hit the 35% or what have you. And do you risk losing your best guy because all of his customers had to, close shop for a little while?
I hope not, in all honesty. I think if you've had one employee that's been like a superstar for, previously, and then something crazy kind of happened and there's, 1 month that he didn't hit quota. I don't think that's ethically what you should do. How you should hold an employee to standards, I guess. Hopefully not. I don't know though. That's a tough question. It probably depends on each specific company and, how they're going to look after post-COVID if we ever get there. So
hopefully we'll get there. I'm kind of over it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I was hoping we were, and then I think we're headed in the opposite direction, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Well, now that we are potentially headed in the opposite direction, what are some of the big top of mind questions you have out there that you're currently searching to have answers to? Like, what are you sort of mulling around in your head?
Top of mind is definitely childcare. No.
Oh, honey, get yourself some Benadryl, because if they annoy you, or maybe some melatonin.
Yes, I stock up on melatonin. That's going to be one of the first things that runs out of stock, and you can't find it in addition to toilet paper, right?
Oh, that's already out now.
Oh my gosh! See, I'm behind the game. I don't know. It's tough. Like we just went through the election, so we kind of know what the outcome is. And then we have the COVID numbers ramping up again. I just think my biggest question is, when are we going to get back to some sort of normal, or is this the new normal? I think, a lot of us have figured out how to continue to operate and, run a business and continue on with life throughout all of this craziness. So thank goodness for technology. Video chatting. I don't know what we would do without that, if we would have been in a shutdown prior to that. So yeah, I think
from your market research and what you're seeing happen across like the geopolitical spectrum, how much longer are y'all predicting? Is it going to be a shitty 2021?
I think unfortunately we were initially hoping that it would get better, mid 2021, but now I think the predictions are closer to like a market recovery in 2022, which is a little bit longer than we expected. Hopefully, if oil prices continue to hover where they are, like 40-ish, 45, then people can figure out how to operate, profitably in that environment. So let's just hope they don't go negative again.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Lindsay, this has been such a fun conversation because, there are so many elements. People think of pitches in very odd ways. And like you said, it's everywhere. It's everything you're doing. You're always selling. And, putting this episode together, I learned so much because, you don't really think about these little boots on the ground or these unquantifiable benefits, that you need to account for, and how do you present them? And while everything is unique to your point, there is some sort of template, some sort of structure, but you're going to have to be the one that understands that because you've done the research.
Sure.
So before I let you go, what is a book, podcast, or other resource that has brought you value on your oil field and energy journey? That you would recommend to someone else who's looking to, make a sell or to move the
yeah. I mean, the one that I listen to sometimes, it's a podcast called Business Unusual, and it's by the lady Barbara Cochran from Shark Tank, which a little corny maybe, but she has a variety of speakers, entrepreneurs that come on every now and then and kind of share their story, which is interesting to hear, everybody kind of in some way, or they always kind of go through the same challenges, and it just kind of is interesting to hear how people navigate that. And then there's always kind of just little tidbits on how to stay positive in challenging times in the sales world and stuff like that. So that's probably the one that more often than not I listen to right now. So
that's awesome. No, if it helps someone think outside the box, then that's more power to them.
And they're short. They're not. So I work full time and I'm a mom, so they're short and sweet, which is good for me. So
wonderful. That matters.
Yes.
You'd be surprised, but time
is limited.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you.
It really gets the juices flowing, and I greatly appreciate your tips, tricks, insights, and what's worked for you, because honestly, there's no point in listening to someone who hasn't been there and done it themselves, and I appreciate you taking the time to pay it forward. So
yeah, no, thank you so much. This was fun. I appreciate you having me.